Hey guys, welcome to Best in Business. I've got an amazing interview for you today. His name is Ron Klein. They call him the grandfather of possibilities. And today he's going to share with us his story, his experience, and really his journey in entrepreneurship. He's a serial entrepreneur. Thank you, Ron, for coming on the show today. I appreciate your time. So let's get started.
The Best in Business with Manny Lopez.
And I'm giving it to you for free.
Manny,
All
thanks
right,
for having me, and I'll be so happy to help your listeners and give them an idea as to what an average young kid growing up during the Depression years was able to do with his life and succeed and make a contribution.
Awesome.
So, came from a working class family, grew up during the Second World War. I was born in 1935, so that goes way, way back.
You've got some experience.
I got some experience, some wisdom and knowledge that I grew along the way. And I was drafted into the service during the Korean War when I was 18 years old. And my life really became so interesting then because I really learned what it was to be a man and a real person and what was important in life. And I signed my blank check with the government, and I served for 2 years in combat in Korea, and then completed my service, which was a total of 10 years in those days, in the reserves with the Army. When I came out, now I was fortunate because I had the GI Bill, and I was able to go to school and really do what I wanted to do. And my love and my interest was engineering, science, mathematics, and went to college, came out of college and got myself an interesting job. And from there on, I became known as a problem solver because I was able to communicate with clients and customers and the engineering department. So we were on the same wavelength. In other words, I always say, and maybe your young people will understand this, I refuse to have a battle of wits with an unarmed person. And what that means is unless we're on the same page and we can agree to disagree and we're communicating, you have to have communications. So I became known as a problem solver. And early in my career, people would come to me with problems and I would say, well, you know what? There really are no problems. Things are challenges.
Yeah.
And there's always a gift. You can find a gift behind that challenge, and there's always an opportunity behind that challenge. So the first thing I did in my career, early on in my career, when I had just gotten out of school, was a very large department store came to me and said, we have a problem. And I said, okay, let's talk about it as a challenge. And it was in the mid 60s and early 60s where they said that people are making what they call charge purchases, credit card purchases with their credit card, which was nothing more than a piece of plastic with an embossed number and their embossed name on it. And the merchant would have to look up that number in a book that they would receive from the credit card companies every month. And if your number wasn't in that book, you were good to go. That was so time consuming. It was so slow. And especially around holiday time, it really slowed things down. So there was no automation. And then once the clerk would find your number, then the decision was up to him whether he wanted to issue the credit or not. So they said, we've got to speed up this process. And I said, okay. I learned that kind of in grade school. And they said, well, what do you mean? Well, I look at it as to what's the given, what do we have, and what's the goal we're shooting for, and everything else is the journey in between. That's the minutia, how we're going to solve it. And I said, first, let's take all those numbers, those negative account numbers that you get every month, and put it into some kind of memory system. And there was no internet at those days and no big, massive computers. It was just these big magnetic drums. And I said, let's store all those numbers and every month update it. And then let's give the merchant a little keypad and he can key in the numbers. And they said, you know what? That's great. That really speeds things up a little, but it still puts the burden on the merchant. And right around that time, reel-to-reel tape recorders came out. And for the young people that don't know what that is, it's two magnetic reels of tape, and you can record music on it, and voice, and so on and so forth. And it moves at a governed speed. It was like the old movie film.
Yeah.
And I said, I've got a great idea. I know how that works. If I could take a little piece of that tape, paste it on the back of the credit card, and record the account number on that little piece of tape, and then make you the motor. Build a little device that mimics a reader, and then take that little tape and slide it through the reader like this rapidly, and it'll read the tape. And now the burden's no longer on the merchant. The information is in the computer. Voila. And I did that.
So in case you guys are not grasping it, Ron Klein is the inventor of the magnetic strip that is on the back of all of the different, and he simplified the process from identifying a challenge that somebody else had. They said, look, we have this old problem where we have to go search for people's information in this thing, and it's just not the problem. We simplify a more automated
Manny,
solution.
talk a little softer because you're cutting out at the high notes.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
Right. Okay.
So I have a question for you, Ron. You went from, in the military to utilizing a GI Bill to go to college. Now, how important would you say today is to going into more of a formal education like college, or say getting a mentor and just going into, say, entrepreneur?
I don't want to talk negative about any education, but it's very interesting that you say that. First, I'm going to say, here's the answer to success in a mindset. People have to be smart. I'm going to hold my fingers up. Smart, daring, and different. That's your main education. When I say smart, that doesn't mean a formal education from Harvard or an Ivy League school. It means learn something new every day. Talk to people, listen to people. You can learn from everyone. Listen and learn, be aware, understand, ask questions. And then the other thing is to be daring. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. And to simplify it for your audience, if you painted something the wrong color, I say, if it's the wrong color, paint it a different color. Don't be afraid of change. And the last thing is to be different. Everything must provide a benefit. That word is so important. If you're not providing a benefit, you're wasting your time, and it's nothing more than a hobby. Now, let's talk about education. Formal education is wonderful because you learn the basics, you learn what's needed, but it's more important, and just as important, while you're gaining that formal education, you're really paying attention, being aware, and learning about Earth's education right around you. And then there's certainly nothing wrong with starting with community colleges. Community colleges give you wonderful basics, and then you can utilize those currents and go on for a formal education in an undergrad school. So you have to be smart, daring, and different. And yes, education is important, and you must learn on your own and learn formally also.
I love it. That's great advice. Thank you for that. So let's get back to your invention. You started this to, was it just one store? I mean, how did this grow to where it is today?
Well, I don't want to use any names, but it was the largest department store in the country. And they're the ones that came and said, can you speed up the process? We have a problem. And I said, once we identify the problem and simplify it, what's the given? Too slow, too involved. And the merchant is the man who's the person, or the woman or man merchant is the one who the burden is placed upon, which is incorrect.
Yeah.
And at holiday time, it's so unbearable. So how do we solve it? And we solved it exactly the way I said. Now, I didn't come up with the strip right away the first time. The first time I came up with punching holes in the card that represented the Hollerith code, and now you can read the card into an IBM card reader. That was just too expensive to manufacture, too expensive to do. It was too labor intensified. Until I finally said, by paying attention, being aware, I didn't learn it in college that there were reel-to-reel tape recorders. I said, oh, I know how a reel-to-reel tape recorder works, because I was interested in that, because I paid attention one day and said, how interesting. You have two reels and a piece of tape that goes through, and it's magnetic and it records. Wonderful. So understanding that and having that basic knowledge, I was able to say, I have a solution for the challenge. Then I also thought a little bit further. How come in this world of obsolescence, I invented that in 1966, and I got the patent on it in 1969. We're now in 2019. How come in this world of obsolescence, something has been around so long and it's not antiquated yet, it's still out there being used?
Yeah.
Does anybody have an idea as to why? And I ask that question all the time, and people say, well, it's simple, it's cheap, it's this, it's that. No, it doesn't require energy. That piece of tape on the back of that piece of plastic has no energy. If something doesn't require energy, it can't radiate, it can't transmit. So there was never fraudulence at the point of sale. It would happen further away down the point of sale towards the computers.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at the new chip, the little chip is a computer.
Yeah.
Just think about what happens when that's energized. Now it becomes a little transmitter. You can put that little chip in the machine in line in the supermarket, and people behind you with a little scanner can say, oh, it's energized now. Let me scan it and compromise it. How many people have had that chip compromised because it's being scanned while it's being energized, or while it's in your wallet and you don't have it shielded in a sleeve?
Wow. So it's kind of like, our advancement with technology is in actually, hurting us by putting us more at risk.
Well, it does one thing. Yeah, it has an algorithm and it does some scientific things, but it's putting us more at risk for the basics, where now it's a lot slower and we need a sleeve to protect it, but we can't protect it while it's in the machine. But that's aside from that. The point is, be aware, learn something new every day, listen. I'm talking to your audience now. Your audience is going to learn something brand new without going to college.
There you go. That's the idea behind this education, is go to the source, go to people who have gotten the results and say, what is it that you did differently? Now, one thing that really stood out there, something I'm teaching a lot to my students, is capture the leader, capture the market. Found the biggest, or they came to you and said, we need a solution. You provided that solution, and then it looks like the rest of the market adapted.
What happened was they now solved the problem in this major department store.
Yeah.
And they tried it. They went through this process and it worked beautifully. Well, the fact that they were able to be successful with this, other department stores and other entities are saying, we want to do the same thing.
Yeah.
No idea in 1966 that my invention was going to affect billions of people.
Right.
I was just trying to solve a problem, which was a challenge, and which I accomplished at that time. Did I know it was going to multiply itself like that? No. But of course,
now question,
it provided a benefit, so it did.
Perfect. Now, do you think you would have gotten the same type of response if it would have been, say, like a small mom and pop store? Or do you think at some point it could have gotten to that big name? Because I think with the way that you were able to position it with a major brand getting success with it so easily and so quickly, it made it where I want to do it. Do you think kind of that played a factor in it at all?
That's was able to speed the process up. In other words, we'll talk about marketing a little later of some of the things I'm doing now. There's marketing through, guerrilla, they call it guerrilla marketing, where you just do it in the brute force way. And then there's marketing where you do it right, spending the right dollars, contacting the right marketplace, starting out with the right vertical markets. But this is a whole situation I can explain a little later.
Yeah.
People will have a better appreciation for that.
Cool.
The next thing that might answer your question somewhat was my next major project was MLS, multiple listing systems.
Yes, let's look at that, because we have a lot of people in the real estate space that, they would love to be able to hear from someone who created the system they use every single day.
Yeah.
So how did that come about? How did you go from making the credit card strip to then go into the real estate industry with the MLS?
Well, another simple problem or simple challenge. Somebody wants to buy a house or sell a house, and they're located at point A in New York City, and then they're either going to buy or sell in California because they're relocating. Now, when they get to California, wouldn't it be nice if the realtors in California knew what the people in New York wanted before they got there?
Yeah.
Or vice versa, the whole thing, communications. In other words, why keep it a secret, or why offer that information late in the game, offer it prematurely? In other words, this is what's available for sale. This is what's available if you want to buy. Okay, this is what you're trying to sell. This is what the parameters are. So I went, the National Board of Real Estate people came to me in 1967 from Chicago saying, we want a system, a situation where we have a central location where all kinds of information comes to that central location, and then people can query that, solicit that information, and they have it available. But there were no terminals, there were no devices that they could use. So I invented little boxes, little suitcase boxes that were acoustic coupled. Acoustic coupled means you can take your telephone, dial up a computer. This was years ago before all of the internet now. Dial up the computer over a telephone line and connect with a modem to a computer, central computer. Take your phone and put it into this acoustic coupler, and then use tones, touch tones, to send information. So to make a long story short, I built a whole series of portable terminals that the real estate people could carry back and forth. I still have some of those that they could carry back and forth and query the central computer and put information into the central computer. So they could put in what they're selling. They could go in and look at what people are interested in selling, so they can also buy. And then I used teletype machines. That was the communication device at the time, because there were no laptop computers, and there were they were just beginning to introduce portable desktop computers. They didn't even come out yet, because this was still 1967. So what was really available was antiquated teletype machines that had keyboards, paper tape punches, and printers. So I would put those into the realtors' locations, and when they would take their portable terminals and query the central computer as to what's available, it would print it out on the teletype machine. So that was the first basic idea that I came up with. What's the feasibility of having one worldwide, it started out as a nationwide central database to say this is what's available in the marketplace. And that was the start of MLS.
Wow, interesting. So it all just comes down to solving challenges that other people are having, right?
Simplify it. In other words, again, smart, daring, and different. What's the word I use for different? Benefit.
Benefit, yeah.
Please keep repeating that. If it doesn't provide a benefit, it's a waste of time.
Just a hobby.
It's a hobby.
Yeah.
Everything must have a benefit. And when I sell something, for instance, I'll give you a good example. Goldfish today have an attention span of 9 seconds.
Yeah.
Millennials, sad to say, have an attention span of 8 seconds. So if I can't tell them what the benefit is for some service or widget in 8 seconds, I'm going to lose them.
Yeah.
They're not interested.
Very
Okay.
true.
So I must concentrate on what is the benefit of a service or a widget. And if that has a benefit, now somebody will listen and say, tell me more, give me details, give me the finite details. But the first thing is a benefit. Okay.
I want everyone to know there's purpose in our pain. This message is brought to you by Manny Lopez. From the start, it was hard, it was dark. At 18 months, me and my sister was left in a car. I was a foster kid, but I changed that, no. I believe it was meant to be. I went from an orphan to CEO. Orphan to CEO. Foster kids, that's my people, so I'm gonna help my people grow. You already know. I went from an orphan to CEO. Orphan to CEO. Foster kids, that's my people, so I'm gonna help my people grow. I was lost working at 9 to 5 until I found a mentor at the age 20 who taught me, man, there's so much more to live for. Stop building someone else's dream, man, he build your own. He lit that flame, I fan that flame, I know for real it's on. January 27, 2017 was the first time God ever spoke to me. I felt that Holy Spirit whisper in my ear, man, he helped the orphans, you have no fear. Crazy opportunities happen since then, no more fear, let down. Working with Ty Lopez, I'm sharing the stage with Les Brown. Wanna teach business to the kids that's in the foster care. You're not alone, I am there. It's Manny Lopez. I went from an orphan to CEO. I want all you orphan to CEO to know I got you. Foster kids, that's my people, so I'm gonna help my people grow. Nobody can stop me. I went from an orphan to CEO. God did what he did. Orphan to CEO. Now I know what it is. Kids, that's my people, so I'm gonna help my people grow. Nobody can stop me. Yeah, all you foster care kids, I know what it feel like not to have a parent. It's purpose in our pain, I'ma help you kids grow. Manny Lopez, your big bro, orphan the CEO.
Okay, the next thing I came up with was voice response for the banking industry. Touch-tone phones had just come out. Everybody knows what a touch-tone phone is. They did away with the dialing phones. Now they had touch-tone phones. I came up with a device that could take the tones and interpret those tones into characters. Because if you would look at the phone and hit the A character, the number 1, it's also ABC.
Yeah.
So if I would hit it once, I could say it's an A. If I hit it twice, I could say it's a B. If I hit it 3 times, it's a C.
Yeah.
If I wasn't in the alpha mode and I just wanted it as a number, if I hit it once, it was a 1. So I came up with an idea as to using the phone as an input device, sending it to calling up the computer first at the bank, being connected through a modem over a telephone line. Computer answered me. It acknowledged that we're connected, like the old AOL signals originally.
Yeah.
And now I could key in my account number. If I key in my account number, now the computer recognized that account number and said, oh, I'm going to convert it from text, to voice, from digital. So I took the tones, converted it to voice, and spoke back the account information to the person who went there. That's how voice response initially started in 1968.
Geez, so man, you definitely revolutionized a lot of what we still use today, which is amazing. The longevity of your inventions, I've really.
Well, it's much improved. Yeah, it's much improved, and it was enhanced. Lots of people enhanced it, but I took the basic rudiment idea of it and developed it.
Exactly.
And then most important is when my career really started.
Uh-huh.
I ended up spending over a quarter of a century at the New York Stock Exchange.
Mm.
And I automated the New York Stock Exchange and created the bond monitoring trade system for corporate listed bonds. But I'm going to tell you how I got there. That's the interesting journey that I think your young people are going to appreciate.
All right.
So here I built a company with the credit card, with the voice response, with the MLS, and the company was growing and growing because in those days there was no programming and software. Everything was circuit boards, transistors and capacitors and resistors. So you manufactured big hardware, big computer stuff. And I ended up having a big factory with 125 employees making things for real estate, making things for voice response market, and doing a lot of work. So I had engineers working for me. It was growing rapidly. I needed money. I raised money through a private placement. And then after the private placement, I needed more money to grow because at that point, I had 3 buildings and I needed so much funding that I took the company public and went on the stock market.
Wow.
Raised a lot more money in those days, and we were well underway. And I was approached by a major insurance company, and they wanted to buy my company.
Wow.
I was a young man at that time. I was still only 34 years old, and I figured, wow, that's the time to retire. However, my retirement lasted 3 days. I sold the company, and in 3 days, I said, I've got to go back to work. However, I had no idea as to what I wanted to do. All I knew was I wanted to develop things. I wanted to be in control of what I was doing. And I did not want a big factory with a lot of employees again.
Mm.
So I decided I was going to go out and represent other people's products because I was quite knowledgeable in communication equipment. I was going to represent other people's products and be a salesman until I could find what I wanted to do.
Mm.
And here's the story. Remember, I say, if you make mistakes, you learn something from it.
Yeah.
And if you painted something the wrong color the first time, painted a different color.
Yeah.
Well, I was about to make the biggest mistake in my life, and it turned my life around.
Mm.
I was calling on a major client that I knew from before, and I was trying to sell him some communication equipment.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was trying to sell him some communication equipment, I saw on his desk was a bid sheet from the Western Union Company. Western Union sells teletype machines, communications and teletypes. And this company I was calling on was in the communication business, and Western Union would put refurbished teletypes up every week for bid because they would rebuild them, put them up for bid. Communication companies like RCA, ITT, Associated Press, they would buy them and they would constantly refurbish it. It was good, almost like telephones, only these were printers and keyboards. And I said, that is really interesting. He said, you know what? We have so much inventory, Ron. You're welcome to the bid sheet. You want to bid? And I said, that's an idea. I said, that sounds interesting. I said, where are they? And they were 60 miles from where I lived in New Jersey.
Mm.
I rented a truck. I went to Western Union. And right at that time, they were divesting themselves of thousands of old teletypes that were manufactured in the 1940s and 50s. These were the old big steel teletypes that were used on battleships, and they were used for communications and telegrams and things like that. And they were putting them up for bid because they were going to go into the satellite business.
Yeah.
And I figured, wow, that's interesting. Maybe I can go in the parts business. And I bid on them. Pennies. I bid pennies on the dollar. I mean, it was ridiculous and there were 12,000 teletype machines. I figured, great. Well, 2 days later, I got a call from Western Union. I won 12,000 teletype machines.
Wow.
Isn't that wonderful?
Oh, yeah.
No, it wasn't. Because I made the biggest mistake of my life. I forgot to ask where they were.
Oh.
And what was the rule? What were the rulings with it? It happened to be that 4,000 of the machines were in a warehouse close by, within 60 miles of my home,
Uh-huh.
The other 8,000 machines were all over the country.
Oh,
Dallas, California, Texas. And they said, now, you know, Ron, you have to take possession of these within 30 days.
oof.
Oh my gosh. Now I didn't own teletypes. I owned a tremendous liability. They weighed hundreds and hundreds of pounds each. Keyboards, printers, electronics,
Wow.
steel cabinets, all over the country. How was I going to take possession of them? Where was I going to put them? What was I going to do with 8,000 machines? Smart, daring, and different. Daring made the biggest mistake in his life.
Mm.
He didn't check things out. So I painted it one color. Now I've got to paint it another color. What did I do? I called the junk man.
Mm.
The junk man said, let's look and see what you have. And he's starting to look and look, and he opened up the bottoms of these machines, and they were loaded with hundreds of circuit boards because that's how they made these things work.
Yeah.
The circuit boards had resistors and capacitors and so on and so forth. And the way they can make all the connections is through traces on the boards,
Yeah.
printed traces. Guess what? All the printed traces were gold traces
Wow.
because gold had wonderful conductivity. They conducted currents very well. It was cheap back in those days, and it was used on battleships, and they didn't want the circuits to rust. They used gold.
Nice.
The junk man
Hey, to use
says,
silver.
he said, I've got an idea. He said, if we take those circuit boards, submerge them into a cyanide bath, the cyanide eats the golds off, and it surfaces to the top. We can skim off the gold, split the profits on selling the gold. And back in those days, in the early 70s, gold jumped from $35 an ounce to $700 an ounce. We took 8,000 machines of the thousands and thousands of boards that were in them, put them in the cyanide baths, and got the gold.
Wow.
So I turned a disaster into a wonderful situation. We were loaded with a lot of cash.
Imagine what most people would have done. They'd have just head exploded, be like, what am I going to do?
But I had no idea as to what it was. But now we had 8,000 pieces of junk because they weren't working. They couldn't work. We scrapped all the electronics.
Yeah.
Now we had keyboards, printers, and so on and so forth. And we had these wonderful steel cabinets.
Mhm.
I called the junk man back again, and we discovered that the steel cabinets were very rich in chromium because they were used out at sea.
Mm.
And we discovered that there was a foreign manufacturer manufacturing cars, just bringing them over to the U.S. in the early 70s, and they had a serious rust problem because they didn't have enough chrome in their steel.
Mm.
We gave all this junk to that Japanese factory. They took it off our hands, and I was rich with all the cash and still had 4,000 machines that I could start a business with in Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Wow.
Take a rest, and I'll tell you the important part of the story now.
Man, that's good stuff. So you're looking at what you've been able to do. It's really looking at every situation as a challenge to be able to solve instead of looking at it as a problem that is going to take you under or whatever it happens that most entrepreneurs fail in because they just see an obstacle, and instead of it being a challenge to overcome, they see it as a problem and it's not something they can actually get through. So
Exactly.
you've been able to really, I mean, the grandfather of possibilities, you're living up to that name for sure.
Yes. So now my career really started the next 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
I was in the parts business now with these 4,000 machines. I refurbished some of them, and I was also selling parts for 50 cents on the dollar to large communication companies, the RCAs, the ITTs, and so on. And 3 months after I took possession of all of this, I got a call from the New York Stock Exchange. And I was so surprised. And they said, we went to Western Union because they had 273 special teletypes that they were housing that we need for the expansion of our trading floor. And this was in 1975 at the exchange. And they said they no longer have them. They sold out all of their equipment to a little company in New Jersey. And they gave us your telephone number. And they said, are you interested? Well, I ran downstairs, looked, and I said, yeah, I've got these 273 oddball machines. I didn't even know what they were. They said, are you interested? And I said, I'll give you a full payout lease over 2 years where you don't even have to come up with the cash right away. Just pay them off monthly because I own them for nothing.
Yeah.
And I said, but however, I want to provide the maintenance on these for life as long as they're on the trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange. They said, certainly. We don't want to be in the maintenance business. They're all yours. You install them, all 270, keep some as spares, and you've got a maintenance company, and we charge them a monthly maintenance fee for those machines. And they were
Wow.
in for a long, long time. Now I had to be on the trading floor of the New York Stock Exchange every day, which was wonderful. I went to this beautiful institution with all these things going on, and I'm saying, wow, I could automate so much here. It's so antiquated. They're still dealing with little pieces of paper. They don't even know about PCs. They don't even know about all these other things. All they know about is the old teletype machines. Walking around and studying and looking, I discovered that I was there in 1983, the bond trading floor. They were trading stocks and trading bonds. They had automated the stock market where they could look at that and trade those from their upstairs offices. The bond trading floor of the corporate listed bonds was still an auction market, and they had all of these men on the trading floor on the phone, throwing their hands up and down, bidding and selling and buying and selling the debt of the equity market on the corporate listed bonds. And I went to the exchange and I said, I could automate this so easily. And they said, Ron, they've been doing it like this for 205 years. They're not going to change. And I said, if I can automate this and convince them to trade with my monitor system, would you give me an exclusive license to be the vendor of choice to disseminate corporate listed bonds for New York? And they said, sure, it'll never happen. We'll see. You want the contract? Draft up the contract. We'll sign it. It's never going to happen because you couldn't convince these people to change after 205 years.
Yeah.
I built the system. It was a little filter box. I was there on the trading floor. I hooked it to their lines. I put it on a video terminal. It worked beautiful. We would filter out only the bonds of choice. I started calling all the bond traders on Wall Street, 1,500 bond traders.
Wow.
And if I wasn't buying or selling a bond in 5 seconds, what do you want? Clunk, they'd hang up on me. Nobody would talk to me. So I befriended the biggest bond manager on the trading floor at one of the major firms. And I said, I'm going to run a telephone line free to your office from the New York Stock Exchange for a month. I'm going to give you a system with a video terminal to put on your desk free for a month. This is what it's going to do. You can trade the bonds and view everything right from here, even before they get the information on the floor. Will you take it for nothing for 30 days? He said, certainly, Ron. And I became very good friends with him. He installed it. For 2 weeks, all of a sudden his phone's ringing off the hook from all the bond traders on the floor, saying to him, Joe, what the heck are you doing? We can't top a bond. We can't buy or sell a bond. You're topping everything. He says, oh, you need one of those little Ron Klein boxes. And they said, what the heck's a Ron Klein box? My phone rang off the hook. Long story short, 1,500 traders start calling me and saying, what do you have? And I said, explained it to them. They said, well, we have to have that. And I said, well, you have to join my bond club. And I figured, this is an opportunity. My bond club costs $10,000 for every trader to join it. They said, wow, that's a lot of money, but these were fat times on Wall Street. We can make that up in a couple of weeks. Okay. I said, but now you have to buy the box. And they said, no, we don't buy any boxes on Wall Street. We only rent equipment. And I figured, okay, I got to make a fast decision. The box cost me $100 to build, and the terminal to view it is $50.
Yeah.
I said, how about $300 a month? And they said, what a deal. You got a deal. It was installed for a quarter of a century, providing transparency.
Wow.
All
Again, and it
because,
comes back to the same thing.
now listen,
right?
all because I read a bid sheet on a client's desk that he
Wow.
offered to me.
That one
That's
bit
the
sheet,
story.
that one small opportunity led into something completely different, completely new. And again, that comes back to the same thing that happened with literally all three of these inventions you had mentioned in this interview. It all came back to capture the leader, capture the market. And
Yeah,
that's what
and
allowed these to grow.
after the New York Stock Exchange, the American Stock Exchange came to me, the CBOE, the New York Futures Exchange. It was one after another. I did them all.
Nice. Now we're gonna have to wrap this interview up for this round. We gotta have you back, Ron. There's definitely some more stories I'd love to have you share. But let's just kind of recap really quick for our viewers. You know, you've got so much experience in not just the inventions, and building and entrepreneurship, and it all kind of comes down to the three things that you've really focused on. It's being smart, being daring, and being different. And each of these
Correct.
has really led you to build what you've been able to build, and not just take an idea and make it a reality, but make it a global phenomenon that is building people. I mean, you're helping in every aspect of real estate. You don't know a real estate agent that doesn't know what the MLS is. Every person's got at least 2 or 3 cards in their wallet right now that's got your magnetic strip on the back of it. And I mean, it's just amazing the stuff that you've been able to do.
What I want them to do, and I'm still inventing, and I've got a couple of big inventions now, and I formed another company. But I'd love for them to go to my website.
Perfect. Yeah, I was going to ask you, it's like, how can they find you? What's the best way for them to connect?
Okay, well, I'm all over Google, of course. But if they go to my website, there's 2 ways to get there. It's thegrandfatherofpossibilities.com, or a shorter way to get there that points to that is the number 4, ronklein.com.
For ronklein.com. Perfect. Now, you guys watching this on the Manifestation School of Business, you'll see on the profile the buttons that are right there. So no need to remember any domains, just it'll bring you right into Ron's stuff. We'll also include his social media accounts that he'll want to plug in. So if you guys want to follow his growth, you're going to be able to do that as well. So Ron, any last words you want to leave for our audience?
Simplify, okay?
Simplify.
And be smart, daring, and different. And most important, when you're confronted with a challenge, you must identify what's the given, what's the solution you're looking for. Don't get caught up in the journey. The journey's full of challenges. Take care of those, but never lose sight as to what's the given. Keep it simple. What's the solution you're looking for? And be smart, daring, and different.
Awesome. Great advice, Ron. I appreciate your time today, sharing with us your wisdom, your experience. And so we'd definitely love to have you back again. And thank you again for coming out. So you guys watching right now, definitely connect with Ron. Find a way to collaborate. If you have an invention, you got an idea, if you want to get somebody on your team that has this type of experience to help grow brands, definitely get connected with Ron. So business, your way to success. I believe we are created for greatness, not mediocrity. That we are to live our lives accordingly, striving to be agents of change as we attempt to lead